Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to share some of my thoughts on the future of enhancement PvP in Mists of Pandaria, but specifically a few things I want to see improved with our spec, including a whole class mechanic proposal. I'm not in the beta, so in the background I'm showing some clips from a Twin Peaks battleground and a duel on the PTR servers. I apologize for the lack of full screen. I wasn't aware what would happen when I was recording these clips. Also, I'll point out that the last time I unsubscribed was at the beginning of Season 11, so my gear is nearly full Season 10 Ruthless, which at the time of recording doesn't have any PvP power on it, but still has a lot of resilience. So you'll see I do very little damage, while at the same time I have very high damage reduction. So from just a PvP perspective, we've gotten two main improvements. One is our secondary stats are much better balanced out, so we're not forced to simply stack mastery, meaning we'll scale much better than in Cataclysm, and we'll be able to choose the stats according to our playstyle. The second is that our survivability seems to be much better, or at least should still be once Blizzard finds the right balance for damage, mitigations, and heals. Right now our healing is pretty amazing, and the idea of a melee off healer was one of the main reasons I decided to roll Enhance in the first place. Another improvement besides new abilities and talents is we can now purge 2 buffs with the glyph. Most buffs are pretty significant now, so it does a lot, but we might turn out to be pretty reliant on the spell. If it turns out we're viable in rated battlegrounds and MOP, the only reason will probably be because of purge. So thumbs up to Blizzard for making those and other improvements. But there are also some bad things and some terrible things about our PvP state that I can tell so far. Besides my own experience on live and on the PTR, I've read a lot of feedback from Shamans who have been in the beta for a while, and I think I have a good grasp of what our problems are as well as some possible solutions. I could easily go on and on about things I like and don't like about Shamans and PvP in general in Mists of Pandaria, but for this video I'm just going to focus on 3 Shaman changes that I would like to see made. The first issue is that our mobility is worse than it is on live, and that will continue even at 90, even if we choose to take the Unleash Fury talent with Frostburn weapon. This is especially bad when you consider that almost every other class has gotten their mobility improved. We lost our 15% passive increase, Spirit Walk is on the global cooldown and no longer gives a short immunity, Earthbind no longer moves slows, and Ghostswift slow mitigation now requires a glyph. There are a lot of ways this can be fixed, but I would like to see either Ghostswift glyph be baseline again, or Spirit Walk cooldown reduced to something like 25 seconds with a 4 to 5 second duration, and perhaps a slow and root invulnerability for the duration. We need something that's on a similar cooldown to other melee closers like Charge, Shadow Step, Roll, and Death Grip. The second issue I want to bring up is our new capacitor totem. Basically the way it works and what it requires right now is unacceptable. First of all, it takes both a glyph and a talent to be anywhere near useful or reliable, and even with the glyph, 3 seconds is more than enough time for any good player to notice and immediately stomp it, or CC the shaman so we can't shoot it. On top of that, totemic projection always places the totem so randomly, which you might notice in the clips, but that it's oftentimes luck whether or not it hits at all. I've seen some people compare it to Hunter's scatter trap, but really it's way worse. When Hunters launch a trap, it always plants exactly where they tell it to, and as long as it lands by where the target was originally scattered, it would always hit. If it's eaten by another player or a pet, it's usually a result of very skillful maneuver, reaction time, and communication on part of the other team, and on top of that, it would at least have hit something. Otherwise, it might just be because the hunter whiffed it if it misses. But even if the hunter is CC'd and after the scatter, at least the scatter target is still blinded for 4 seconds, and the cooldown on the trap isn't used up. But on the other hand, if a capacitor totem is killed, or if the shaman is CC'd or even silenced before he projects it, the 45-second cooldown is completely wasted. In high-level arenas, the way it is now, capacitor totem will probably almost never hit. So what I would propose is that the totem gets strapped to the shaman's back when used, and after it charges in 5 seconds, the shaman has an additional 5 seconds to throw the totem to the target point for an instant detonation. If it's not thrown within the 5 seconds, the totem will detonate where the shaman stands. This method would still make the ability countable with a CC, while at the same time still saving some control for the shaman by placing his position to possibly stun something even if he's unable to throw it, rather than just letting it detonate in the middle of nowhere, or worse, just let it get killed off instantly. Additionally, it would save a keybind since the charge and throw could both be placed on the same action button. Like I said before, it's unacceptable the way it is now, and I would even take a reduced area effect and stun duration trade-off for some better reliability. The third issue might seem small, but to me and others it's a pretty big one. I've been kind of disappointed that Enhancement and Shamans in general haven't gotten any kind of functionality changes besides totems, which is an alright change. One thing throughout Cataclysm that I hated is Lava Lash, and it isn't even because it required Flame Tongue to do 40% more damage or Searing Totem stacking mechanic. It was the fact that we had two melee abilities with substantial cooldowns that the exact same function, just to do plain old damage. No other melee classes had such an annoying set of attacks. The cooldowns aren't short enough like Crusader Strike or Mortal Strike that we can easily get them into a rhythm, yet they're also not long enough that we can forget about them for a while. Both of them being melee attacks, what makes it worse is that since we typically jump in and out of melee range, we have to constantly look down to see which attack is off its cooldown. Couple that with all the other cooldowns we're getting, and it's an incredibly annoying pain in the ass, like we're just playing whack-a-mole with our action bars, and it's generally not fun. So, I've had an idea. How many of you remember this?
Storm, earth, and fire, heed my call.
So I was wondering why Blizzard hasn't made some ultimate Shaman ability and called it Storm, Earth, and Fire yet. About 4 years ago, back in Warcraft 3, I made a custom map for the fun of it, and in it I made a Shaman hero. And without getting into how the game worked, simply the Shaman had 2 lightning abilities, 2 earth abilities, and 2 fire abilities. When you use an ability of an element, he would get up to 1 orb of that element. Once he had 1 orb of each element, he could use his ultimate ability, Storm, Earth, and Fire, which just annihilated stuff. What I think would not only be incredibly cool, but would help the functionality of the class, is to see something similar for all Shamans. So here are the changes I think can be made in order to implement something like this. These changes actually have multiple purposes than simply finding a way to get rid of Lava Lash for enhancement. It's to improve the class overall. I'm also looking to solve other problems with Shamans as well in both PvE and PvP. Number 1, combine Flame Shock and Frost Shock into Frostfire Shock. Frostfire would deal initial damage and apply 2 debuffs, a dot and a slow. Number 2, unlink the cooldowns between Earth Shock and Frostfire Shock. Increase each cooldown to 8 seconds and adjust the damage appropriately. Number 3, introduce a new orb resource that looks similar to Shadow Priest. Shaman could have up to 1 orb each of a Lightning Orb generated by Storm Strike or Lightning Bolt, an Earth Orb generated by Earth Shock, and a Frostfire Orb generated by Frostfire Shock. Number 4, change Lava Lash to Elemental Hammer, or something similar named. This would be like the Storm, Earth, and Fire ultimate I mentioned previously, a heavy damage attack with no cooldown that becomes activatable when the Shaman has 3 orbs activated. So a Shaman would charge up each of his orbs with shocks and lightning, then be able to use a hard-hitting ramp-up attack. It goes without saying this would be a much better ramp-up mechanic than Searing Flame stacking, and would also improve the mobility of our damage. Number 5, make Elemental Blast baseline for Restoration and Elemental Shamans. Instant cast and activated using orbs the same way Elemental Hammer would be. Elemental Blast is a good ability, but it's pretty boring for a level 90 talent, and something better can definitely be cooked up in its place. Number 6, Elemental Shielding will be a second ability. It would consume 3 orbs to create a shield around the Shaman that reduces damage taken by 20% for 5 or 6 seconds. So this would be the defensive alternative to using orbs, similar to how Maelstrom procs are used on either lightning bolts or heals. Right now, both Enhancement and Elemental Shamans need help in dealing with multiple enemies attacking us. Shamans have almost no abilities that scale versus multiple opponents, meaning they're more effective the more enemies there are. We have 2 or 3 at most, but if you look at every other class or spec, they all have the potential for at least 6. It's probably the biggest reason why our survivability is so bad, especially in Battlegrounds. And if rogues can get a 30% plus damage reduction for 20 energy with no cooldown, I don't see how this could be a problem. But I guess the trade-off for having nothing that scales with more enemies is buffs and abilities that scale with more allies. This is another class design aspect that I haven't liked. I think we've had too many group buffs and it's gimping us in every other area. But that's a whole other topic. Number 7, create a UI graphic that can be displayed in the middle of the screen to show the Shaman which orbs are activated at any one time. Number 8, this is something extra. If shock cooldowns are unlinked, change Frozen Power to Earthen Power. Have the root proc off Earth Shock and reduce its duration to 4 seconds. Because having the Frozen Power root tied to Frost Shock forces us to use up its diminishing returns when we don't want to, and all we need is the slow, like when we want to stack Frostbrand. It's annoying. Number 9, replace Horrible Flame Shock and Fire Nova AoE mechanic. So my idea for enhancement would just be a lava hammer, a conal fire damage attack that costs a good amount of mana. Each attack increases fire damage taken from the Shaman by X%, stacking up to 3 to 5 times. This can be used in conjunction with Magma Totem, and will also give us a way to take out 100 snake traps. Personally, I don't PvE, but I'll for sure never PvE while enhancement still has its current AoE mechanic. So there would be a ton of benefits to this new orb or elemental mechanic for all Shaman specs, and literally no downside. I'll just list a few that comes to mind. Number 1, it's awesome and not boring. Our current rotation can be incredibly boring, especially for PvE. Number 2, it'll help ease the burden of enhancement's annoying cooldown mechanic by providing us with an intuitive graphical display that'll basically show us which attack cooldowns are up next without having to stare at our action bars while there are so many other important things we need to watch, like buffs and interrupts, our target, and our positioning. And that's an important one. Number 3, with 2 shocks being unlinked and an effectively slightly shorter cooldown on the proposed elemental hammer compared to Lava Lash, it'll make haste and speed buffs like Bloodlust finally as effective for enhancement as it is for other classes and specs. Also, having gaps in attack rotation sucks, especially when you're trying to finish a target. Number 4, I don't play elemental, but I've heard and seen that they definitely need help with mobility and survivability when there's more than one enemy attacking them, or even just one. Having a few more instant casts and the possibility of a damage reduction shield could be just what they need. Number 5, elemental shamans have a cool offensive mechanic rather than just plain old dull lava bursts or lightning bolts. It's especially bad when you consider Discipline Priest attacks heal and paladins have stuff like Denounce and Holy Prism or Execution Sentence and stuns. So there are other benefits I'm sure you guys can think of, but I'll say I'm not asking for shamans to be overpowered or anything. These are mostly quality of life issues and a cool mechanic that also takes into account some of our glaring weaknesses, especially in battlegrounds, that I think all shamans can probably agree with. You guys can let me know what you think, and thanks for watching the video.